So we saw Anthony Joshua versus Rafael Zumbano Love on the weekend. And it's fair to say Joshua was impressive. He took very, very little. He kept Zumbano Love out of range by a powerful jab that he worked off. And he smoothly counterpunched Zumbano Love with a one-punch knockout. A brutal KO. He iced him. I've been critical of Anthony Joshua on a few of my videos. I said he was robotic. I said he was too muscular. And I said that I don't genuinely buy into the hype that he's that big a puncher. Now, Zumbano Love isn't an elite level fighter, but he's got things on his record that suggest durability. And I think the one punch that Joshua was able to land on Love showed that Joshua does carry genuine power. And I, for one, was much more impressed by that knockout than the Sprott performance, the Skeleton performance, the Backtoff performance, you know. For me, that was an indication of a real force in the heavyweight division. A few questions for me still remain. What's his stamina like? Is he too robotic? Is he too muscular? Will he fade late? What's his chin like? How's he going to cope against a more technical fighter? How's he going to cope against a fighter with a jab? You know, there's questions that exist. But I was impressed by his performance against Zumbano Love, despite the fact that Love put in, you know, quite a horrific effort. Now, next up, Anthony Joshua's fighting Kevin Johnson. Kevin Johnson's an interesting fighter. He is what I would class as an elite defensive fighter. Don't be fooled by the fact that this guy hasn't beaten anyone throughout his career. He's not beaten that name. You know, he beat Alex Leopold, you know, who beat Dennis Boystov and then got to fight Klitschko, you know. But Kevin Johnson doesn't have a track record of beating A-level opponents. And recently he's been happy to become an opponent who shows up for a paycheck without the desire to win. We've seen him lose in lopsided decisions to the likes of Chisora and Fury. More recently, we saw him lose in a poor fight with Christian Hamer. And Christian Hamer is the sort of guy that you'd really back, you know, Kevin Johnson to beat. Technically, Johnson's got all the skill set to beat the likes of Christian Hamer. Perhaps there is something in the fact that he's had no time to prepare. Perhaps he could put in an improved performance and turn up in better condition based on the fact he's had enough notice for this fight. But the fact he was losing a decision to Christian Hamer tells me that the days of this guy winning fights and, you know, turning up to upset contenders is over. Put simply, at the minute, I would say Kevin Johnson operates on a lower level than Tony Thompson. Because Tony Thompson, you know he's turning up to cause the upset. Whereas with Kevin Johnson, you know he's turning up to survive. That being said, Kevin Johnson does bring certain things to the table. He's got a good jab. He's got a great chin. But as I've already mentioned, what he brings is an elite boxing defence. I am not sure how many fighters in the heavyweight division genuinely have a better defence than Kevin Johnson. He really is so disciplined, so technical, and so experienced. It's very hard to land anything of note on the guy. He's slippery. It's like, you know, trying to catch a bar of soap. And even if you do catch him, the way he leans, the way he rolls, the way he blocks, you know, you're unlikely to be able to land a punch on Kevin Johnson like you did against Rafael Zumbano Love last week. And Kevin Johnson's got more tools than Zumbano Love. Now, I've already said I don't anticipate Kevin Johnson turning up, you know, trying to lay the smackdown on Joshua. He talked a good game, but Kevin Johnson often does that. And for me, he's, you know, once again going to be very much turning up to survive. But if the going gets tough, Johnson has got a jab. Johnson does carry some power, possibly more power than anything Joshua's fought in a ring before. And he's also got awkwardness. I mean, I've heard stories that Johnson and Joshua sparred. This is from Dillian White, who's obviously a biased source. But they sparred at Klitschko training camp. And Kevin Johnson potentially got the better of it. because he's hard to work out. Kevin Johnson, put simply, is a frustrating, awkward man to fight, who's hard to land on and is very, very tough. Let's talk briefly about the fact that Kevin Johnson went the distance with Klitschko. He went the distance. That's Vitaly Klitschko, by the way. Massive puncher. He went the distance with Tyson Fury. He's never been stopped in his career. Now, Anthony Joshua has clearly got all the momentum. He's clearly got the pedigree. And he's icing guys out, knocking guys out. But no matter how big the puncher, you get to a certain level in the game and suddenly the knockouts stop. Deontay Wilder, one of the biggest punchers we've seen in years, gets to the top level, suddenly he goes the distance. Sergey Kovalev, pound for pound, arguably the biggest puncher in the sport, destroying guys, gets to the very top level of the sport, Bernard Hopkins, suddenly the knockout stops. Keith Thurman, again, known as a devastating puncher, fights the Leonard Bundus, fights the Robert Guerreros of this world, and the knockouts stop. Now, Gennady Golovkin hasn't yet fought the top of his division, but he's been knocking guys out in rounds 1 or 2. Suddenly he fights Martin Murray, and it takes him a lot deeper in a fight. My point is, no matter who the fighter is, Wilder, Thurman, Kovalev, you get to a level where power alone is not enough to see you through. And there are going to be fighters out there you have to go to points against. I think this is the fight Anthony Joshua goes to points against. I do not see Anthony Joshua knocking down or knocking out Kevin Johnson. Kevin Johnson is so savvy, I don't expect him to allow the referee to jump in. He maintains enough distance and enough activity not to get stopped on his feet. And it's almost impossible to take him off his feet. I know Chisora did it with some sort of looping rabbit type punch, but I didn't really see Johnson as genuinely hurting that. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see Johnson as at risk of getting stopped when Chisora hurt him like that. Now, from my eyes, Anthony Joshua is a huge favourite to win this fight. Put simply, he'll have higher output, he'll be more aggressive, he'll have more desire, and he'll push the pace. I think it's highly likely Anthony Joshua wins this fight. I don't completely rule out an upset. Number one, because Joshua's never been tested with a technically capable fighter like Johnson, and Johnson may find a gap in his defence. We don't know what Joshua's chin is like. Number two, because Johnson will take him rounds, and when Joshua's gone rounds, we'll see how his stamina holds up, and he may well fall away and tire with all that muscle. So I don't rule out a Johnson victory. However, I acknowledge that with, let's say, 80 to 90% likelihood Joshua wins the fight. He's going to be much more aggressive, much more active, much more eye-catching, and he's got all the desire in the world, whereas Johnson's probably turning up for a paycheck. The thing is, I just don't think that Joshua is going to knock Johnson out. Vitaly Klitschko, top 20 all-time heavyweight, possibly top 15 all-time heavyweight, couldn't knock Kevin Johnson out. Tyson Fury couldn't knock Kevin Johnson out. I think most would agree Tyson Fury is a top 5 heavyweight in the current division, if not top 3. Yeah, put simply, the list could go on, but Kevin Johnson's got a track record of surviving. He's defensively elite, as we've already discussed. Let me move to betting. At present, Anthony Joshua is riding an absolute storm in the UK. He's the biggest name amongst the casual fans. And right now, Paddy Power are offering what I deem to be ridiculous odds on this fight. So in the win-only market, you have something like Anthony Joshua 1 to 8, the draw about 40 to 1, the Kevin Johnson win at about 16 to 1. For example, if you put £8 on Anthony Joshua, you would win £1. And £1 on Kevin Johnson, you'd win £17. Sorry, you'd win £16 and get your pound back. Now, for me, that doesn't represent a sensible betting play. I'm more interested in the method of victory. Sorry, I made a bit of an error there. In the pure win-only market, Anthony Joshua, I believe, is actually 1 to 100 to win. So you have to stake £100 to win £1. Now, I've somewhat given away my next point. But Anthony Joshua to win by knockout is 1 to 7 on. Anthony Joshua to win by points is 4 to 1. Now that's the real value I see here. Because, as I say, I don't think Kevin Johnson's going to bring enough to win. But I don't think Anthony Joshua is good enough to stop him. You know, Johnson's still young. He's still not being knocked out. He's going the distance with the top fighters. I just don't see Joshua stopping him. So I think the value potentially here is on Anthony Joshua to win by points at 4 to 1. Now, given the value we're being allowed here, I would actually do a Dwyer and hedge the play. I would suggest this would be the way to structure the bet. Let's use a round figure example. You stake £10 on Joshua to win by points at 4 to 1. You stake £1 on the draw at 40 to 1. And you stake £1 on Kevin Johnson to win at 16 to 1. Now, by doing that, you have effectively bet on every outcome bar the Joshua KO. So you're covering, in the Kevin Johnson to win at 16 to 1 bet, you're covering Johnson by KO and Johnson by points. You're covering the draw. And obviously the main play is your money on Joshua to win on points. So £10 Joshua to win on points at 4 to 1 returns 50. £2 on Kevin Johnson to win at 16 to 1 returns 34. £1 on the draw returns 41. So, off your stake of £13, you are making a tidy profit. A tidy profit if any of those outcomes happen. Obviously, you lose it all if Joshua wins by knockout, which is what the bookies think will happen. But I think the bookies are scared of public opinion, and they're worried about the crest of this wave that Joshua is just riding at present. I don't think the bookies are necessarily worried about the hardcore fans who saw Tony Thompson versus David Price. I think they're worried about the average punter who watches Sky piling in on Anthony Joshua. Now, I think that is a superb bet. 4 to 1 on Kevin Johnson, on Anthony Joshua to win on points. I don't see Kevin Johnson having the desire and output to beat Joshua. Although I'm hedging the play to make sure that if that does happen, I'm safe. And if Anthony Joshua stops this guy, he really is the second coming. You know, he's done a better job than Klitschko and Fury, and I don't believe he's going to. So I think Joshua to win by points is an excellent, excellent bet. And I think with the value the bookies are allowing us, it's worth hedging it. Let me know your thoughts. Am I wrong? I haven't put any money on it yet, but I'm going to. If I'm mad, tell me. You might save me a few quid. Look forward to discussing. Thanks for watching.